Hey everybody, and welcome to the DRF TicketMaker Travers Day webinar. I'm your host, Peter Thomas Fornatal, joined today by several interesting people. The usual co-host of these webinars, Mike Hogan, the DRF Director of Product Marketing, is on the line. How are you doing today, Mike?
I'm doing great, Pete. Good to talk to you as always, and I'm excited about today's webinar.
We are joined today by our producer, Charlie Zeggers. Charlie is going to be jumping in from time to time with questions from the audience. Folks can use the webinar tool to submit a question. I think it's fairly intuitive. Oh, there it is. We even have a little slide to show you just how to do it. If you have questions about TicketMaker, about these Pick 4 races for Travers Day, feel free to submit your questions there, and Charlie will be periodically jumping in and passing those questions along. And then our featured guest today is none other than Tournament World sensation Jonathon Kinchen. Jonathon, welcome to the program.
Thanks, guys. I appreciate it. I'm looking forward to talking a little bit about TicketMaker, which has been pretty helpful for me over the years.
So just so folks know who might not be as familiar with Jonathon or might say, hey, what does a tournament guy know about TicketMaker, just want to pass along that Jonathon was the architect of a cash betting score using TicketMaker on Derby Day that ended up paying some pretty big dividends when American Pharoah crossed the line first. And more recently, he used TicketMaker to cash a $20,000 for 50 cent Pick 5 on Arlington Million Day that won him the Hawthorne Park contest that day and has put him in a commanding position on the NHC Tour. Let me ask Jonathon, how did you become familiar with TicketMaker, and how did you learn how to use it? You obviously didn't have the benefit of watching a webinar like this. Like, where did your interest in TicketMaker come from, and how did you teach yourself?
Well, it first started with Exotic Betting, Steve Crisp's book, which I think is, if you haven't read that book, it's brilliant about how it explains why TicketMaker is so important. I think just the basic idea of TicketMaker is that you are pressing your opinions and you're betting more on things that in your mind are more likely to happen rather than the traditional caveman where if you include a horse that's 30 to 1, you're using that horse, you're spending as much money on that horse as you are on American Pharoah. And to me, there's a problem with that. And so I had the app when it was an app form, and I used to carry it around with me everywhere, and I had it on my phone and I would use it anytime I played a multi-race bet, and so that's kind of where it started. After I read that book is when I realized that was something that I just had to have with me if I was going to play multi-race bets.
Mike, Jonathon mentioned the app for TicketMaker. These days, there is a preferred method for using TicketMaker. There's 3 different ways, I guess, still you can access it. But why don't you walk folks through what their options are in terms of where they can access TicketMaker, and then we'll get into the slide that's currently on the screen, sort of breaking down what exactly TicketMaker is for the uninitiated.
Yeah, absolutely. So these days, and we got some slides showing it as well, these days the app is no longer needed to be downloaded. What you do is you just point any web browser, either from your desktop, from your laptop, from your mobile device, from your tablet, to drfticketmaker.com. It's mobile responsive. It will scale to your screen, whatever screen you're using, and it is so much more useful than the old app because, as we'll show a little later, it feeds in information on the day of, like tote information, scratch information, changes, things like that, whereas the old app was really very static.
So yeah, you could try to make your play and put it through, and if there was a scratch, you'd have an error. And now with the new web-based version of TicketMaker, not only can you very easily construct those tickets with that real-time information, but then one of the things that I love the most about it is you have the ability to do one-click betting. In other words, in the old days, folks would sort of manually, much smarter people than me, people like Steve and Chris, would manually come up with these combinations, write them on the back of their paper or whatever, and then have to go enter them all individually. Part of the benefit of TicketMaker is, yeah, you could still do that theoretically, print out a screen and then punch in all the tickets, but that ability to seamlessly place that wager on DRF bets that to me is just an incredible time saver and one of the best aspects of the program, honestly.
It's absolutely huge. And let's talk. We kind of jumped ahead a little bit into the use of TicketMaker. We'll step back a little and just talk about why you want to use it and what how you use it and some of the logic behind it. And I've got a screen showing right now that kind of talks through. And Jonathan mentioned Steve Christ's Exotic Betting book, which is really where the idea for it came. And it really gets back to, as Jonathan said, pressing those opinions that you believe in more strongly so that you're able to maximize your opinion and make your bet that much more efficiently. The TicketMaker, we got it showing on the screen, DRFTicketMaker.com. As we said, it works on any mobile or desktop or laptop device. It's not just multi-race wagers, it's exactas, tries, supers, and when you're doing it day of and the race of, the other nice thing it does is it pulls in the exacta probables, for instance, and shows you potential overlays and underlays. We're not going to get into that here, but I urge you to check it out on your own because that's a pretty cool feature of it that really isn't taught. I mean, a lot of people talk about TicketMaker in terms of multi-race wagers. There's a lot of really amazing uses for it in the verticals as well.
That should be a whole other webinar at some point.
It should. It could be a fun one because we can actually do it with live races, during the race day. Here we're of course looking at a race sequence that's tomorrow, so we're not going to have scratches and live tote information. But what we can do and what we'll do after the webinar is the tickets are now shareable, so we can copy the link. You can save that somewhere so that you can bring it up tomorrow, and when the scratches are in there, you'll see real immediately which A's, B's, and C's are no longer available for betting, and you can make your changes accordingly. And let's also talk a little bit about those A's, B's, and C's. And we won't read this here, but this is pulled straight from Stephen Christ's Exotic Betting book, and he goes through and gives his definitions of what separates A horses from B horses from C horses from the ones that he eliminates completely. I've got my own opinion of how I like to play it. Obviously, Pete, I know you do too. Jonathan, of course, everybody approaches, I think, a little bit differently. And so even though Steve's book is the Bible, talk a little bit about your strategy and how you identify horses that you might single in as A's versus B's or C's.
Right, yeah, I mean, I think the slide kind of explains it, right? I mean, you're looking for the A's are primary contenders, the B's are reasonable contenders, and C are unlikely winners, but they create a lot of value. I think that's pretty spot on. I think that our interpretation of those things can be a little bit different. For instance, One thing I never use is I'll never use an even money horse as a B horse, right? That horse is either an A horse or I'm not using the horse. So there's a lot of different things that as you start to play with TicketMaker, you'll get a little bit more comfortable with and kind of create your own rules. But, for me, I think an A horse is a horse that is very likely to win. Or I'll even use an A horse from time to time that presents like a ton of value. That is just such an overlay that you have to use the horse because if he wins, there's so much value going to be injected into your bet that you want to make sure you have him covered in all combinations.
Absolutely.
And sounds like a contest type horse. Is that fair to say, Jonathan?
It's actually exactly a contest horse. If you find a horse that you would use in a contest at 12-1 and you would use that horse as an A horse, that horse needs to be, if you would use that as a tournament horse, that's the kind of horse you would use as an A horse just because they present so much value.
Right. Jonathan, one thing I've noticed in looking at how you construct your tickets, I had the privilege of looking over your shoulder a little bit on Derby Day and on and for your Hawthorne score. You are. It seems to me, correct me if I'm wrong, that personally you're not a big believer in seahorses. That you do most of your work with the A's and the B's. Am I reading that right?
Yeah, because typically what you'll do is if you're going through and you're revising your tickets, you'll start to say to yourself, "Geez, I don't really need this seahorse." And in my opinion, I think you're better served spending more money on the things that are more likely to happen, which is the same reason we're all talking about TicketMaker, the reason we use TicketMaker. And so for me, seahorses typically become horses that are wastes of money, where you're just, it's almost like a fear ticket, like you're scared that this 30-to-1 shot's going to win, and you want to make sure you have it, rather than a what you think is going to happen ticket. The only time I'll use C's if I believe the pools are going to be large. If it's a big day where there's a lot of craziness that can happen. For instance, tomorrow I'll be using a couple seahorses. Today in the pick 5 I use no seahorses. It just depends.
Well, I think
you have to kind of feel the sequence out.
I think those two ideas go hand in hand, though, about how aggressive you are with those contest-type horses. I think for some people, they would say, oh, this horse is 12-to-1, maybe not a super likely winner, and be inclined to make it a B or a C. I think with what you're doing, it makes sense because you're comfortable upgrading those horses. We've even had conversations about certain long shots where I'll say, oh, yeah, I'm not sure if it's going to win, but this horse is going to be great value. It should be a B, where you'll say, oh, actually, I use that horse as an A for the same reason, because it's going to be a lot of value. You seem like, because you're not afraid to upgrade those prices into the A and B level, it allows you to eschew the C level a little bit more. Every player is going to do it a little bit differently, but I think it's important to note the way that you've had your success since we've got you here today. Mike, do we want to go over anything else before we head into the races here today?
Well, we're showing Jonathan's actually, since Jonathan mentioned the ticket that he submitted for the Hawthorne contest on Arlington Million Day, we're showing that here, and in red we've highlighted the one that actually hit. So you can see all the different combinations that if you were doing this manually, you could do it with one click through DRF Bets. If you're doing it manually, I don't know, what's that, 20, 23 tickets, something like that.
Takes a little bit of time.
Yeah, it takes a little bit of time. I'm moving on to this is kind of the overview, and I'm doing this partly for the folks that are watching this on the archived version. You can actually pause this, take a look, walk through all the different features. If you want to learn more about that, you can go to drf.com/ticketmaker if you want to learn more about some of the strategies. But I think now is as good a time as any. Let's dive right in. I'm going to start from scratch. I'm going to open up a brand new window, and we're going to go to DRF TicketMaker. This is the first thing you see. I'm also going to make it full screen. First thing you do is you select your bet type. We're doing the pick 4. It defaults to today's races. We, of course, want tomorrow. And it will feed in the information for all the tracks available that have pick 4s on that day. Obviously, we want Saratoga. It knows that there are 3 pick 4s that day. Jonathan, we're starting with race 8, right?
Yep. The all
starting
stakes
with race, all stakes pick 4. So you'll see once you hit this screen, it shows you the sequence of all the races, and you toggle through along here. But the nice thing, and the thing I love about this version compared to the older one that you mentioned on the app, is it has not just the numbers, but it has the names and the morning lines of each horse, because sometimes I get a little stupid and I'll mix up the 3 and 5, and I want to make sure I'm actually picking my right horse. But one of the first things that we're going to do, I'm not sure what your budget is, Jonathan, but I'm just going to enter
I did 200.
Okay. We'll enter in 200 as our budget. Obviously, you can change that. That's one of the nice things about TicketMaker. When we tweet this out, you can, as an individual, go through and change any of these things, as you'll see once we go through. So starting in race 8, Jonathan, what's your opinion here? I think from our discussion on the podcast, I think I know who your lone A is.
Yeah, I'm going to, I think that, just based on the reasons we talked about on the podcast, and we won't turn this into too much of a handicapping deal, but, this is one of the times where I think when you're doing these tickets, it's good to try to find a single somewhere where you can press that opinion and get a little bit more value. I think we all think Competitive Edge has a really good shot of being the favorite. Now, if you play a 50-cent ticket and he wins and Pharaoh wins, I don't care what happens in the middle, it's just not going to pay very much. So in this situation, what I've decided to do is use him as a lone A horse. Then I'm going to use 6 other horses as B horses. I'm going to use Grand Billy, the 2, the 4, Watershed, the 5, Mr. Z, the 7, Holy Boss, the 10, March, and the 11, Run Happy. And I'm going to use 1C here. It's a Crazy Horse, Limousine Liberal.
Yep.
So my thought process here is that I am going to try to have, and when we get through the ticket, you'll see that I have a $10 all A ticket, and that'll make a little bit more sense once we get to that portion of it. But I'm going to try to crush competitive edge. If he and Pharaoh win, I plan to have a $10 pick crush or pick 4, where if it pays $120, I have it 10 times. If it pays, $250, I have it 10 times. So,
right.
And if competitive edge loses and we get a better price, the value will be, I'll get rewarded with that value with the other horses in that B spot.
Absolutely. Makes sense. All right, well, let's move on to race 9.
Yeah.
That's the Forgo, and we've got 12 horses in that race.
All right, so I'm going to use 2 A's and 2 B's. My 2 A's are going to be the Big Beast and Private Zone. And the B's will be Bourbon Courage and Tamer Cruise. Now, I think it's important, look, the reason TicketMaker is great is because you can, I'm an old football coach, and we used to say, take what the defense gives you. And that's exactly what we're doing here, just taking what the day gets. You don't have to, just because it's Travers Day and it's a stakes day and it's blah, 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 people think that they have to find value. Well, I can't, it's all chalky. I got to use, the 2 at 30 to 1. I got to find some value in this pick 4. Well, the truth is that your value comes from pressing your opinion, and that is true if you're going to play caveman tickets for 50 cents. But if you can find a way to have the pick 4 10 times, 20 times, whatever, you can play these favorites on days that the favorites just make sense. The Big Beefs and Private Zone make sense. So I'm going to stay along those lines here.
Well, and you are creating a little bit of value too, because you're taking stands against not even using 6-to-1 horses that are likely to take money, especially in the pick 4s in race day for Todd Pletcher and Salutos Amigos for David Jacobson. By leaving them off completely, that's where you're also creating a little bit of additional value. Absolutely.
You have to take stands when it comes to multi-race bets. The only way that you can get away with it is if you have a 40-to-1 shot that wins, and that doesn't happen very often.
Yeah.
No, and if that's your opinion, there's a completely different and better way to play it. If you're just trying to throw it out there as a lottery ticket, your chances of making money in the long term go down completely. I think that really, to have any prayer of being a winning player in your multi-race bets at the end of the year, other than having one lottery-like result, is to do this level of analysis and come up with intelligent ways to maximize your opinions through using a product like TicketMaker. Should we take a look at the Sword Dancer?
Let's do it. That's race 10. 8 horses with a legitimate favorite, at least in terms of the morning line, 8-5 Flincher.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Right here, I'm using Flincher as an A. I'm also going to use Messi as an A. Like I said earlier in the podcast, I mean, the way that he's been winning is just so impressive. He's, I don't think we'll get 10-to-1 like you mentioned earlier, Mike, but nonetheless, if you can beat Flincher, there's huge value here. Mm-hmm. And so I'm going to take a little bit of a chance with him as an A horse. He's also, he's definitely going to be the horse I'm going to use in a tournament setting. So that's why he kind of fits for me as an A. The B horses I'm going to use Imagining off of that crazy trip, moving early last time. Red Rifle with that huge move up with that inside rail. I know Todd's been a little bit with that inside trip. I know that Todd's been a little bit cold, but leave him off at your own risk. He might just be getting good. And War Dancer, who was just definitely didn't embarrass himself last time. I think he was in that race at Saratoga as well. And so I'm going to use him as a B horse. Nothing in here C-wise. I guess the 7 and 3, if you're interested, are horses you could use as C horses. I think it's important to note that a horse like Twilight Eclipse is one that I'm just going to completely fade. The horse is going to take money because, for one, because it's a West Point horse and they take money all the time. But he's going to be he's got a name recognition. He's been running against main sequence all this time, and I think if you can, it's not good. I typically don't like to have the first 2 choices as A horses. It just, you feel like you're losing a lot of value there. Sometimes you can't avoid it. So here I'm going to leave Twilight Eclipse off.
I like it. Well, let's jump to the Travers. It's the obviously the main event for the day. It's the 11th race, and as soon as we click the first A on the right side here, you'll see the ticket and the different combinations start populating.
Yeah, so here I'm going to use mid-ocean as an A. I'm just kidding. I'm going to use, I think there's two ways to approach this race. First of all, I'm going to use American Pharoah as an A, obviously. And I think that you can do a couple of things. If you really don't like American Pharoah, then you don't need to use him at all. You know, if you're a guy that thinks that Texas Red is sitting on a big race and you need to make Texas Red a lone A horse, American Pharoah presents absolutely no value to you as a B horse, unless you just love some 40-to-1 shots earlier in the card. But for me, I'm going to single American Pharoah, and then here's where you have to make a decision, is whether or not you want to use some backups. I decided to use backups, but I'm not going to use them in the B column. And when you look to the right, you'll see that you know that there's a lot of combinations with B horses, and I don't want to spend too much money on these other horses as B horses. What I'd rather do is just have a couple of like, if one of them wins, I have a small ticket. So I'm going to use, as a C horse, I'm going to use Upstart, Texas Red, and Frosted.
That makes sense. And, you know, I've done pick 4 plays. I don't know if I would do it in this sequence, but I've done ones where I used A's in earlier legs that I really liked, like the messy type horses that are 10-to-1, may even get bet down from that, but are still going to offer value in the multi-race wagers. If I use horses like that in the earlier legs of a pick 4, I've done it where I've used every horse in the last leg as a C. You know, maybe 1A like American Pharoah, but everyone else is a C because, like you said, if I create value in those early legs by beating favorites, sometimes I want to open myself up to a big payout, and if I'm right with my A's in the early legs, I've got all in the last.
I love that idea. And all is one of those things that certain players love and certain players loathe. And the sort of sensible criticism against using the all ticket in Caveman is, well, you know, you're just spreading so much you have no opinion. Why are you betting? But with the extra layer of ticket writing acumen you can get from TicketMaker, you're not doing that. You're still being able to press your opinions. Just you have a safety net almost if you have 3 strong enough opinions in other legs, and presumably it's a race where you don't love the favorite, where you're using every horse as a C. But I mean, I wish we'd had this conversation a week ago, Mike, because I was in that position going into the pick 4 on Sunday, where I didn't have the 3 long shots. I'd had some stronger opinions going into the day. If every horse had been a C, it would have cost fractionally more, and I wind up catching the thing pretty good. So I think that's an important point to make about how even a tool like the all that some players can sort of look down their noses at really can even start to make sense in the right sequence. And we'll spend some time later in the webinar today talking about how we adjust, how we use TicketMaker depending on different types of sequences. Jonathan, did you have any other backups here?
No, that's it for me. And now, I do think that it's important to realize that when you do these tickets, that's half the work, right? Selecting the A and the B, it's half the battle. The other part, and arguably the more important part, in my opinion, is now how you spend your money. So the way that I've written it is that you can, like Michael, I'm sure Michael will show you, you can change the dollar amount. You can manually change it. I'm going to do my all A ticket for $10. I'm going to do the A's with 1B for $2.50. I'm going to do the A's with 1B for a flat $1. I'm sorry, A's with 2 B's for a flat $1.
Flat $1, okay.
Yep. And then the C tickets, the lottery tickets, for 50 cents.
Gotcha. Yeah. Oops. You have to do the 0 first.
I got to be honest with you guys. I just learned something about this new version of TicketMaker, because in the version that I used to use that was embedded into Formulator, I don't think if it had that feature, I never learned to use it. But I love this because Jonathan makes a great point about that further level of tweaking. The numbers that populate in there they're sort of mathematically based, but every player is going to have their own interpretation of exactly what an A, B, and C means. Jonathan spoke eloquently about how he looks at it, and then that ability to go back and weight that, that's just terrific. I mean, I think in the old days, a lot of people would just end up playing. What you either do is you play your A line and you hope to get lucky, and then you have no backups, or you decide to spread and include these other horses in your A line, and then even if you're right, you don't hit it for as much as you're supposed to. So this ability to sort of mind meld, if you will, with the algorithm that Steve and Chris essentially helped design, this is powerful stuff, and I didn't even know you could do that to that level within the context of the program. I think that's really powerful and cool.
It's a fantastic part of it, and it's one of the things I love, especially, and we see the note here that, of course, you can't bet any of the races through any ADW or even at the track until the race day. But if tomorrow, if you were to come back, do this ticket, there would be a Bet Now button. Bet it straight through DRF Bets. You don't have to do those changes. It just one click and then confirm. It goes through and passes all those wagers through directly into DRF Bets. One other thing I'll note, we're not using it here, but there are a lot of people that do like to do multiple tickets where they might do their all A's for something like $10, and then they're all A's and B's for maybe $1 or 50 cents or whatever. It's a kind of a different approach to that pseudo caveman ticket, and then they have their defensive A's with 1C. There are a lot of different ways you can do it. You can go in, of course, as I make a change, it resets our values, so you have to enter that back in. But sometimes on smaller legs, it's the same defaults for pick 6 versus a pick 3. And, on a pick 3, you might not want your A's with 2 B's. You might want only the A's with 1 B and the A's with 1 C, and then press your all A's a little more. It's nice that you can check and uncheck those opinions in order to really maximize based on the particular sequence that you're looking at.
I also like having that all A's and B's option sometimes. When I've just described TicketMaker to certain players, they'll say, oh, they'll be afraid, and they'll say, oh, but what if I use these 2 horses on different tickets, but I don't have them on the same ticket? And that's a question I'm going to ask Jonathan next is, is he afraid of that happening at all? But I do feel like for players who are concerned about that, the sort of pseudo caveman ticket, to put that in for a certain amount of money, so at least you catch the thing if your A's and B's hit each leg, but then to use the other tickets to either hit all A's with 1 B and 2 B's more times, or to just catch it on the other iterations of those tickets. I think that's an interesting option to have. But is that something that you're concerned about, Jonathan? Have you ever had that happen on an important bet where you used every horse but not in the same ticket? And are you afraid of it? What's your feeling about that?
Yeah, I mean, that's a tough thing when you have A's with 3 B's. It's like I don't bet A's with 3 B's. So, for me, I tell myself, like, look, I can be wrong twice in a day. If I'm wrong 3 times, it's probably just not my day, and I don't need to hit the bet. So I typically will just spend my money on that, and press my opinion and say that I'll be right more than I'll be wrong, and hope that I can hit it. I mean, there's a lot of times where I don't play 2 B's, and the reason is when you it's important that once you're done, you look back through your ticket and like actually say to yourself, for instance, look at ticket number 6, and you say to yourself, okay, so I'm going to beat competitive edge with one of those horses, and then in the next race I'm going to beat the big beast and private zone.
Private zone. Yeah.
Okay, and then here. Okay, so what's that going to pay? Okay, that pay around blah blah blah. You could think it out in your mind and say, like, I kind of like that ticket. Maybe I'll add another 50 cents to that, and you make it for $1.50. And so it doesn't have to be like all of your A's and your B's are the exact same price. You can kind of weigh it accordingly to make sure that you're covered. If you're taking a stand in a race with like a single A, but you're really pretty high on the B's, but you just couldn't make them A's, then you can press that one line a little bit more. That way, if you get beat with that B combination, you're still alive to multiple tickets, and you still can find some value in what you felt was a pretty good ticket.
Here's a difficult question for you, Jonathan, that I didn't tell you I was going to ask you, so you could feel free to sort of punt if you want, but because obviously you're doing this exercise to help us out with the webinar today, but looking back at these tickets, where do you feel the value is coming from in playing this pick 4?
I would have to say the value is in, I believe the value is in the stance. So if when I play this, there's a chance that I'm not going to play 2 Bs tomorrow. There's a chance that and I won't play Cs either. There's a chance that I'll just play As and then A's with 1B, and I'll just literally try to hit the pick 4 for $20. Because I think that it's pretty formful. I think American Pharoah is going to win. I think that Flincher is extremely likely. Obviously, I like Messi a lot, and if he can win, that's great. But I think the big beast in private zone can't lose. I don't think that one of those 2 horses will lose. I think Competitive Edge is extremely strong. I mean, there's a chance that I'm going to have an even money horse, an 8-5 horse, an 8-5 horse, and a 1-9 horse. I mean, there's a strong chance that could happen tomorrow. And if that happens, I'm not interested in having a dollar pick 4. I'd rather just go to Shake Shack and watch it. You know what I mean? Like and so I think it's important that the value, in my opinion, is the ability to take a lot of stands, to not fall into the trap of false price horses, and to press it and have it a lot of times. That's where I find the value. To me, I mean, it's going to be tough in tournaments. There's for the BC qualified tournament tomorrow and all the DRF and the NHC qualified tournaments, people are going to be shooting for the moon with horses, and I just think that it's extremely formful.
And to put words in your mouth for a second here, I think what you're also saying is you're okay not cashing this pick 4 if your opinion is not correct. If you're wrong about a horse like Twilight Eclipse, you're okay with getting $0 return.
You have
some
to be.
Players, right, exactly. And some players, whenever they play a pick 4 or any multi-race sequence, they look at it not to maximize their opinion, but they want to cash every bet that they're playing.
Right. There's one bet, in my opinion, that you want to just hit it, and it doesn't matter what happens. You just want to hit the bet, and it's the pick 6. Other than that, in my opinion, you have to try to maximize your opinion, and TicketMaker is the best way to do that, whether it's the pick 5 at Saratoga, the pick 5 at Del Mar, the pick 4, whatever. You want to maximize your opinion. The same, it gets even, to me, that statement becomes stronger as you get into smaller multi-race plays. The pick 3, you want to try to hit a $10 pick 3. You don't want to have a $2 pick 3 that pays $150 because those don't happen that often. It's tough to hit those. So that's where I find the value in this race, to answer Pete's question, is that, in this sequence is you have to, I'm just hoping that I'm right. I'm hoping Competitive Edge. If Competitive Edge wins and American Pharoah wins, then I'll have a pretty good shot of hitting it.
Yeah, there's so many different ways to approach it. I think your approach makes a ton of sense for the way this sequence stacks up. There is a danger, I think, of doing what Mike was saying, and I think TicketMaker doesn't get you out of that. If you're one of these people who's going to try to use it just to have a 50-cent ticket, that's going to involve a lot of spreading. You're going to just end up getting even money on your pick 4s. I don't think that's possible to really win doing that, especially because you're going to end up getting yourself into some tax tickets where you barely even made any money on them. I think if you're going to use TicketMaker to help you spread in certain legs, I think that's great. But I think unless you hate 4 favorites or have one long shot key somewhere, I think overspreading is one of the dangers of the TicketMaker. It's a path you could be led down that can get you in a little bit of trouble. Would you guys agree with that?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think one of the things you also want to keep in mind is when you're looking at the screen here, you kind of want your dollar amounts to be somewhat proportional. They don't need to be identical, but proportional in a way where when you look at the all A ticket and the total cost is $40. Then you look down at the A's with 1B and you're looking at, $60, $70, $85. And then you look down at the A with 2 Bs and we're at what, 70, 50, 60, 66? Is that good math? Yeah.
66.
Yeah.
So you kind of want them to be in the general range. When you start playing around with TicketMaker a lot, you'll see where you'll have you don't want it to say $10, $240.
Right.
Like that doesn't.
Right.
You're spending $240 on something that you have already admitted is less likely to happen, and you're spending $10 on what you think is more likely to happen, you might want to revisit how you're betting it or change your ticket structure out a little bit.
Well, let's use a real-world example, Jonathan. You said a minute ago when we were talking that I think the phrase was you didn't see a world in which the Big Beast or Private Zone lose. So you have put a little bit of your play against them, but let's see just how little that is in relation to the whole ticket. So that would be ticket 4 for $10 is against those two. And if folks can follow that along there, ticket 4, Mike's showing you with the cursor. And then also down at ticket number 8, $6. So $16 only out of a $200 investment is with either of those two not winning. To me, that's
also ticket right. 6. Also ticket 6.
Yeah.
Oh, did I
ticket
miss
6
one?
too.
So that's how much more is that?
$24.
So $24. So basically, 12% of the total bet is going against that very strong opinion. That to me feels correct. Does that feel right to you that's the right way to align that?
Absolutely. I mean, like I said, it lays it out for you in a way that you can actually look at what you're doing. When you play caveman tickets, a lot of times it just gets lost in the shuffle of what you're trying to accomplish, and it can be very confusing. And even in this situation, I mean, I wouldn't be adverse to moving Tamara Cruise and Bourbon Courage back to Seahorses. I mean, I do kind of like Bourbon Courage. I think he presents a lot of value. But if feel free to do things like that to press your opinion. I mean, if you wanted to have the thing for $50, the all 8 ticket for $50, there's a way that you can try to construct it that way.
Right.
It gives you so many options. That's why I love it.
The other thing, I'm going to use your. I'll actually go back and put this back. I've been making some changes as we've been talking, but I'll use your opinion on Messi as an example, where sometimes I might do 2 different ticket maker plays. One where you have Flincher as your lone A, and then play it out from there, but then one where you're using Messi as your lone A, and how that changes your opinions in other legs. And like you said, if Flincher wins, there's a lot less value, and you need to hit that pick, that all A ticket a lot more than if Messi wins. So you of course can submit as many, especially through DRFS, you can submit as many different ticket maker plays as you like. I sometimes might do 2 or 3 under a sequence that I'm really interested in playing, especially if I've got a price horse in one leg.
I love that idea, Mike. I think that's a great point about you have to be cognizant of what these things are going to pay. Let me ask you this. This is another question I don't know the answer to. When you do that, and I think that's a perfect example with Flincher and Messi, how do you keep the ticket maker tickets straight, essentially, so you can go back and look at them again, or are you just doing them and betting them right away? Like, how does that? I think folks may not understand how to do that, because I know it took me a little while.
That's a good question, and it's a good way to show the share function, because what we can do here is you hit the share button, and on the of course it says share on your mobile phone. It's just got the little I don't know what that is, the circles with the line on it. I'm not sure what
it's the share icon.
I guess the share icon. It brings out, we can click the Twitter one, and it will say, check out my pick 4 play. It knows that it's pick 4. It knows what day. It knows it's Saratoga. So it will give you pre-populated text, and then it gives you a link to the actual ticket play itself, so that you could tweet it. You could send it to your friends. You could click this copy to clipboard. It says copied. You can paste it into a Word doc or email it to yourself, so that tomorrow you'll know, okay, I'm playing this one, and you can label it, Flincher Lone A. And then that's
key to labeling, because if you don't label it, you can get lost. I've learned this the hard way.
Right, exactly. And then you still have the same ticket. You can mess around again. Click copy, you get another link, you can label it Messi Lone A. You can do 3, 4, you could do 5, 10 different ones, because we don't know. There could be let's say something happens, Private Zone spikes the temperature overnight and he's scratched. That's going to completely, yeah, well, okay, sorry. Mid-ocean is scratched. that's going to completely change, or it could completely change not only your play, but the way you might handicap the race. So, you know, we don't have any MTOs in this sequence, but you might have a sequence with MTOs. You could do one where, okay, if it rains off, I want to create an MTO version the day before. There's no reason why you can't.
Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead.
And so one thing that I will say, and I'm not sure if this is something that we could maybe get changed, but you want to be careful when you do all the work of selecting the dollar amounts that you're going to spend, because when you do tweet it or you send it, or you send the clipboard, I believe when you go back to it, it loses the dollar amounts. So make sure that you know what I usually do typically is I take a screenshot of my bet so that I have it, and then I'll change the file name on my desktop. Sometimes I'll text it to myself, I'll email it to myself. Me and a couple buddies have a group text. We text our plays out to each other so we can kind of follow along, and you can have a route. And now that I saw you on that Twitter button, it kind of reminded me, we can remind everyone at the end, but I think it'd be pretty cool tomorrow if everyone tweets their play, tag Mike, a DRF formulator, and then maybe use the hashtag, Travers Pick 4 or something.
Yeah,
and then
I love it.
Throughout the day, we can all kind of look at each other's plays and see what everyone's doing and how everyone kind of constructed their tickets in kind of some cool different formats.
I love it. Share your tickets. Idea. Yeah, you're right. When you copy it or when you tweet it, right now, any of the modifications you do in this area does not get carried through. When it was first launched, we launched it with the A's, B's, and C's information and the budget information, but the next phase in making updates is to capture all of that, any changes you make to the dollar amount, any changes you make to maybe I don't want to bet the all A's with 2 B's. That stuff doesn't currently carry through when you copy to the clipboard. It's this information, but that's the next phase.
That would be great. Yeah, that's terrific. Let me ask you a question about those modifications, Jonathan. Are you doing them by feel? When you change that all A line, for example, to $10, did that number come from anywhere in particular, or are you just sort of intuitively trying to spend a certain amount of money on your strongest opinion?
I usually play with it for quite a bit of time. What I'll do is I'll usually just have an idea of how much I want to spend on that sequence, and I'll just work backwards. I'll say like, well, what's the most I can spend on my A's, where it's not silly that I'm not spending enough on my other ones. And so, I'll start at 5, I'll double it, I'll go to 5 and see, it costs $20. I'll go to 10 and it costs $40, and then I'll kind of work my way down, and I'll try to have the A's with 1B, the 2. One thing that I learned is that I used to not spend enough money on the A's with 1B and the A's with 2 B's, because typically those are the ones you end up hitting. I mean, if I'm being honest, those are the ones that you hit the most often, and it's frustrating at times when you don't have them as much as you should, because you spent way too much money on another portion of the bet. And so, there's no mathematics to it. It's typically feel. In a normal situation, I usually will try to have my all A's for X amount, and then I'll have my A's with 1B for half of that. So that's what I try to do. But in this situation, I was so skinny with my A's that I had an opportunity to really press it up to $10. A's with 1B at $5 might make it a little bit too expensive.
One thing, Mike, you mentioned before. Now, this is just an idea I'm going to throw out. This is advanced, but I do think it's something for people to think about when they're putting together their bets with Formulator, especially pick 3s, but also pick 4s. It gets back to that idea of really trying to pay attention to what combinations are going to pay. And I think for me, that's one of the biggest things in terms of making these kind of adjustments. Is you could even do it, if you want to really go down the rabbit hole, you could even do it with a spreadsheet where you use the morning line or your own guess at what the horse is going to be, and you figure out what a certain combination is likely to pay. You could do the basic math on that, and then really take it to the next level, especially with a sequence like this. If, as Jonathan said, this thing really chalks out, like try to come up with an idea of what that number is going to be on these different combinations, and then adjust accordingly. I think that's kind of the next level. There used to be people who would use that to play the pick 6. Actually, another tournament player, well known in the tournament world, Randy Gallo, used to have a pick 6 syndicate where they'd figure out, they had some sort of spreadsheet where they'd figure out what the different combinations of the pick six were likely to pay based on what the horses' prices were going to be. And then they actually, because that was the pick six, kind of a different animal, would not play the combinations that paid under a certain amount. The logic being, I don't want to play the pick six and hit for $4,000. I want to play and have a chance to make a $20,000 plus score. These are the kind of things that, down the line, once you develop a familiarity with TicketMaker, you can start thinking about and start trying to incorporate into your play. But just that conversation about weighting the different combinations made me think about it, and I wanted to throw that idea out there to see if you guys thought it was something that was worth thinking about.
I love it, PhD level stuff. So real quick, Pete, I do want to mention we've got a number of questions. So
let's
Charlie,
get to them.
Yeah, we've got a little bit of time left, so I want to make sure we get to those questions.
Let's do it.
Well, we have a couple different questions about tax implications of how you're structuring the bet, which I think is a really interesting way of applying the product.
Great point.
Basically, does it make more sense to submit a ticket with a larger base bet, like the $10 that we're showing in what we're playing with right now, or would it make sense to do, a 50-cent bet?
Yeah, you want to do a 50-cent 120 times. That's absolutely correct.
Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah, and that's one area, unfortunately, where I'm pretty sure the DRF Bets direct plugin falls down. I don't think you can do that automatically, can you?
You can do a rebet, or what you could do, in some of the ways you would do it is you do the full bet for $1 or for 50 cents each. If we bring our budget down to I don't know what the minimum. Let's do 50, and we'll see. It's $60 minimum to do it all for 50 cents. You could play that one, and then you could uncheck certain ones, play it again. So you can do rebets that way through this.
For me, at that point, I would go a little bit old school, and I might print my screenshot and just punch them in manually and hit repeat and have to check it off. It's not optimal, but I think it's well worth it to avoid the ridiculous rules in the tax code that our friends in the NTRA are working hard to change, but are still in effect right now. So I think that's a great question, and I wish I had thought to chime that in, but I applaud the person who asked.
No, and I think it's also important if you're at the racetrack, and there's no offense to you, you got to find a good teller that can handle when you're going to go up there to bet 10 tickets, and you say, I want the 50-cent pick 4, and you call it out, and you say, can you please repeat that total of 20 times? Then he'll bang it out in 20 times, and then then you do the other one, 50-cent pick 4, and kind of have it 5 times or whatever. I will say this: if you ever get into a time crunch, keep this in mind that my all A ticket, there's no way it's going to pay $600.
Right. Not for 50 cents.
There might be a way where a situation where I might say, let me get a $2 ticket, 5 times just to save a little bit of time because there's really no tax issues there. But it's a slippery slope. But I typically just repeat the ticket.
Good question. Good answer. Charlie, any others?
Yeah, as somebody else asking, let's say that for some reason you don't want to bet ticket 6 in this sequence. What's the best way to just avoid submitting that?
You can zero it out. I believe you can.
No, you can't. I think if you zero it, goes at 50 cents. You just got to be. You just got to be mindful that when you're doing it, you don't submit it. Unfortunately, maybe if through DRF bets, I don't. Unfortunately, I live in Texas, so I don't get to participate. But if you submitted it through DRF bets and then went in and canceled that one ticket, that would be my automatic.
That's probably the easiest way to do it.
Yes. Good point. Yes, that is the way you'd want to do it.
I like the guest who knows more than the DRF guys about this stuff, even though he doesn't have it. He's the one of us who doesn't have a DRF bets account.
Well, and that's actually a really good point. We always get the question when we do one of these webinars about why can't I use DRF bets in whatever my jurisdiction is. In a lot of places, it's due to state laws and state regulations. So New Jersey, Texas, are two of them where we're just simply not allowed to offer the service there. Can we print the ticket?
You can. Let's see. I believe print. I think thought print was one of the available. Well, you can print now. It doesn't make a PDF, but you can just print because it's a web browser. You can print like you would any web page, and then you can save it as a PDF if you have a PDF creator.
So
right.
that's
Another thing, a little trick that I do, if I do it on my iPhone, is I'll scroll to where everything's showing on the screen, and I'll do that cool little screenshot deal where you can save the picture of your screen. Mm-hmm. That's another way that if you're out and about and you want to make sure that you don't lose it, because sometimes it will reset on you after after the sequence has started. So if you want to keep track of what you've done, you can take a little screenshot on your phone or whatever.
Right.
Yeah,
because that's the next. The good and bad part of the toad information is it knows when the sequence is over, or at least the first leg has passed, and it's no longer a valid wager. So you'll get a message here saying this sequence has passed. We're working on making some adjustments to that where you can go back and look at an old ticket, or where you can carry, like if this pick 4, if you want to carry it through to a pick 3, starting in race 9, it doesn't lose those. These are down the road modifications to make TicketMaker a little bit more flexible.
And some folks listening might not understand how to do screenshots. Just really quickly, I can tell you on most PCs, it would be holding down the function screen, and then typically there'll be a function key up at the top over towards the right that says print screen. If you hit those two buttons at the same time, that will capture your screen. You could then either paste that in a Word document or a program like Paint and save it that way. I'm sure it's something similar on a Mac. John, you're a Mac guy. How do you do it?
On a Mac, it's Command-Shift-4. So Command-Shift and the number 4, and it will bring up like a kind of like a crop type of icon where you can crop out whatever, you can kind of crop out, you can just make like a square around whatever it is you want to take a screenshot of.
On a Samsung phone, it's the center button at the bottom of the screen and right.
Same thing on the iPhone, similar to that.
Yeah. Just one last question before we start to wrap. A couple of people have asked, are there any kind of general tips for setting these up on a much smaller budget?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you can, I think Mike could even do it. He could change it to $40 right now, and and you can play with, Usually, my advice is if your budget is $40, I wouldn't use the C's and I wouldn't use the 2B ticket, and then I would just try to maximize it with the A's and the, to kind of see where you're at there. But go ahead.
Absolutely, and that's the nice thing about it is you can scale to whatever your budget is and whatever you feel comfortable with.
To the person who asked that question, maybe they should definitely take note of the check mark in the box that Mike's been playing with. You can just in one click eliminate all those A's with 2B tickets and A's with 1C ticket. In fact, if we do that and lower the base amount of the top line, what are we looking at in terms of our play here?
Well, first, before I lose it, because one of the other things I wanted to show is use the tip snipping tool, which is what I always use for my screen caps.
Oh, cool.
And I'm going to actually do that right now.
Where do you get that from, Mike? I don't even know that.
It's a Windows system tool, and I'm going to save this. I'm going to throw it on my desktop. You're going to see all the stuff I have on my desktop, but I'm going to call it Jonathon. And
look
so
for
I'll
a lot
tweet this out a little later.
Look for some punk rock MP3s on.
I'll tweet this out a little later with the share link, which of course will go back to the minimum budget. But let's do that. Let's make it a $40 budget, and we'll remove the all A's with 2B's. That brings it down to $27. Even if you wanted to remove the A's with 1C, that brings it down to $19.
Right, and it's also important to note, even if though he hasn't changed the price of his all-A ticket, he's still a smarter ticket maker because he's not using the 2, 4, 5, 7, 10, 11 with all of his other B horses. You know what I mean? Like even if you're not going to weight them, it's still a smarter play because you're going to play things that are more likely rather than things that are less likely.
Right. Yeah, and see here, if you do $54 for $5 with the all A's and $1 for the all the A's with 1B, or you can maybe even just go back to the 50 cent and something like this is $37. This, if we're talking about a $40 budget, this would be a good way to modify Jonathan's opinion and to play it for a much lower budget.
We've got about 4 minutes left here by my reckoning. Charlie, do we have a couple more questions we can get to?
That's about all we have from the peanut gallery right now.
Well, folks have one more second to do that. Meanwhile, I just want to, thank everybody for joining us here today. And it looks like we have a little deposit code to talk about. Mike, what are the particulars on that?
We do. We've mentioned how TicketMaker works so great with the DRF Bets account. If you don't have one, you can sign up today. A $200, up to $200 deposit match. You put in $200, you get a $200 bonus, and we're also offering 5-to-1 guaranteed odds on American Pharaoh. I believe it's a $10 win bet minimum. So if you're of the opinion, like Jonathan, Pete, and me, that he's your most likely winner, and you don't want 1-to-10 or 1-to-20, you get $5 or 5-to-1.
Hey, it's an extra $50,
Yeah, why not?
Actually, I have one more a comment from the Peanut Gallery. Our good friend Jacob Luft, who is listening right now, reminds me that after you hit submit, there's a print option on that page too for your.
Right. When you get to the DRF Bet screen.
Right.
Do you have to be? I'm not sure if you have to be a DRF Bets member to have that, but that's another very easy way to do that for your records. Or it's just nice to know when you're. It's a good thing to have if you're placing that bet at home, say, and then wandering over for the late pick 4 at Saratoga. You have a record of your bet right there.
That is another benefit to using TicketMaker with a bets account.
Absolutely, which is something we encourage everybody eligible to do. I think it's a lot more powerful, and time is money, and that ability to not have to take that, it can be kind of stressful too, trying to either call 20 bets in or worse yet, just punch them in, looking for one piece of paper or one screen to another screen. This is a way to eliminate all that and just to streamline everything. I want to thank everybody who helped out in the broadcast today. Charlie, great job getting through those questions and getting us some real gold. Mike, as always, so informative when it comes to your thoughts about everything on the DRF product side. If you had a question and we didn't get to it during the show today, feel free to hit us up on Twitter. Jonathan and Mike, both very active on Twitter. Mike, of course, at the man behind @DRF Formulator. Jonathan is @UT Big Hair. If you have a question for me, I can be found at Looms Boldly. Be happy to talk about the various applications of TicketMaker. I love Jonathan's idea of a bunch of people who watched the webinar sending around their tickets. What was the hashtag we were going to use for that?
Let's go Travers Pick 4, right?
Yeah. Hashtag Travers Pick 4. Share your ticket. And, of course, best of